it's great to see you, Gloria.
Yeah.
Hope we can finally make this happen.
Yeah, likewise. I'm really excited. And hopefully this will be a kind of monthly session.
That's the plan.
Yeah. I guess we can start by introducing ourselves, maybe. So why don't you go ahead?
Sure, Rio Longacre. I'm a managing director at an organization called Slalom, which is a consulting firm. I've been working in consulting about 15 years, and I guess I've been working in digital marketing advertising for about, it's going to date me a little bit, since 2000, so 24 years.
Wow.
This is year 25.
Yeah, that's amazing. Lots to learn from you, definitely. So I'm Gloria. I'm the head of product at GGTV. And so as an advertising technology firm, and I actually have been in this space probably 6 years, so a little shorter than you, but have been working in advertising technology for a while and then jumped to this new startup in September. So it's been very exciting.
I've been really excited to follow what you've been doing at GG.
Yeah. Great. Should we shout out?
Yes, yeah. We definitely, before we jump in, we would be remiss if we didn't do a shout out to Greg and Anton at Delve Deeper. Big thank you to them for creating this amazing space that we can film the session as well as offering it to us. So thank you, Greg and Anton at Delve Deeper.
Yeah, this is an amazing studio. So thank you so much. All right, let's dive in. So today we're talking about customer data platform, CDPs. There's been a huge shakeup in this industry. So I'm really excited to hear your take. I know you've been kind of working with them for a long time and following them. And we're going to dive into what they are. But I'd like to start kind of with a hot take. And you can see if you agree with me or not. So I think that CDPs in, let's say, the next couple of years will actually cease to exist. Why? Because these customer data platforms, they need to be integrated with different types of platforms or even absorbed so that this rich profiling can actually be used in end-to-end marketing solutions. I know this is kind of a big take, so I'm curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe a bit controversial. So
Okay.
I don't necessarily disagree. I guess the caveat I would add to that is I think that there'd be very few CDPs operating as kind of standalone package CDPs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it'll be hard pressed for them to continue doing business not part of a broader solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this trend started a few years ago, where Segment was acquired by Twilio, right? And then Twilio being the contact center as a service kind of platform you can build on top of, and then there's the acquisition of Segment, which you can argue whether that was a good acquisition or not. But there's been a bunch of them subsequent to that, and recently there's been a flurry of CDP acquisitions. So there's definitely, I think that signals something, right?
Yeah.
It definitely signals this change in the air.
Yeah.
And it's impacting CDPs to the point that they're being acquired, right? And there's been a bunch, there's mParticle last week, right? ActionIQ a few months ago. And I would guess that this continues. And I think I'd agree with you in that many of the existing CDPs that are standalone will either be acquired or I think some of the smaller ones that don't get acquired would probably disappear, I guess.
And to touch on that, what's interesting is now, so Segment was a huge success in the sale, but these recent sales have not been so successful, let's say. They've been acquired for less than their value. Why do you think that's a trend that's going on?
The composability trend, like the trend towards, let's say, mock architecture, I think that's been impacting CDPs really meaningfully, not necessarily in a good way for the CDP companies. I think it's been a great way for marketers, right? For companies that have been, let's say, buying things like CDPs to help them manage their first party customer data. I think it's good for them. But I think what we've started to see is many of the things that CDPs do. I've been working in like helping brands plan their MarTech, AdTech like purchases and investments and plan their stacks for better part of 10 years, right? And I remember about 10 years ago when we started doing these assessments, we had this capability model. We'd look at your organization. We would say, okay, what capabilities do you have? What do you not have? What tools are supporting these capabilities, and where do you have gaps? And it was really obvious, this was like 10 years ago, that there was a need for something that managed customer data and created a single source of truth for customer data and gave marketers a place they could go to manipulate it.
Yeah.
To create, to build segments and then to push it to activation in different channels. And I think you started to see some tools like marketing automation platforms doing part of that, right? I mean, in fact, pre-CDP, we even had a lot of marketing automation platforms pitching themselves as that. And when CDP started, we had many marketing automation platforms saying they were CDPs, right?
Right.
But I think that they did some of those things. Maybe you could refer to them as like CDP light. But what became really obvious was, well, they're great if you just want to activate an email, right? But if you really had activation in different channels, and it's probably not going to give you what you need. And there was a need, I guess, this long-winded way of saying there was a need for something to give marketers that place they could go with the front end, enter CDPs. And I think the trend we've seen is those, when you look at what CDPs have done, which ranges from the ingestion and normalization of data, the identity resolution, segmentation, analytics, and activation, you look at all those things, they're now starting to sit in different tools.
True.
So I think that trend of like having these capabilities disintermediated and placed into different solutions is putting a lot of pressure in CDPs. And I think my guess is they're selling for less than what you would expect their valuations would be, is because they're not making a lot of sales, the revenues are declining, becoming harder to acquire customers, or they're losing customers to these newer players and maybe people who are deciding not to have CDPs at all, right?
Yeah, it's true. I actually also worked in consulting for a little bit on the data side, and we would also look at a company's whole tech stack and see, okay, what do they need? What types of CDPs is perfect for them? And it was such a need back then because they weren't tracking their data correctly. They had nowhere to house this data. So I think this is a whole conversation of CDPs would spin up these warehouses for them to store the data, to then, segment and everything. And now I think this is so different. It's so interesting because it's so much easier to just spin up your own warehouse, have control of that data. It's privacy friendly, and more companies, I think, are diving into this because it's completely accessible now. But back then, I think it was a little bit, it was difficult. It was not as easy to access one. Maybe there weren't as many, those smaller companies, you don't have someone that is full job is, housing the data and like a data analytics person. But now I think this is completely opposite, and people are doing this more in-house. I don't know if you agree with that.
I don't disagree at all. It's interesting that with CDP is funny. I even read something recently. I mean, I don't know if this is true or not. You see these things online and sometimes you scratch your head, right? But I think the study was that 95% of people who have CDPs are unhappy.
Wow.
Like, I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah.
It's a high number, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's 95% or 90%, 80%, I think the reality is a lot of people are not happy. And I don't know if you can blame the technology. I mean, I think it's more maybe they had unrealistic expectations. They didn't implement it correctly. That's usually what we see with, advertising, marketing, technology. When there's unhappiness, it's usually because of that. Usually the tools do what the tools are expected to do.
Yeah.
But a lot of unhappiness with CDP implementations. So I think that we've seen a lot of turnover. And it's not easy, right? You pull your data in there, you go through the whole, you inventory your data, you build connectors to put in your CDP, you build your segmentation model, you have it takes months, right?
Yeah.
I did implementations where it takes 6 months at an enterprise level, right? To go through that pain again.
That's interesting. And so do you think some companies are stuck with it because they feel like they've put so much time and effort to spinning it up, and now they say, no, we're going to continue using the CDP because we took so much time and effort?
I think there's some of that. Yeah, but I think that what I'm saying too is despite the pain, people are moving, right? Which says, I think, speaks volumes to just how unhappy they are. Like they're not getting the basic functionality they expected, right? For whatever reason.
Yep.
So then they'll move to something else. And I mentioned the kind of composable architecture. I think that, I mean, if you ask me what's putting the most pressure in the CDP market, why are these valuations a little lower? It's that, right? It's that people say, oh, well, I have Snowflake. If we're going to build a CDP on top of Snowflake anyway, why not just have Snowflake? I can maybe do identity resolution somewhere else. I can have a third-party service. I mean, there's services that are not even that expensive, right? I think one of the big tech partners is, I think their identity resolution service is 25 cents per CPM. I mean, it's not a lot of money, right?
Yeah,
so if you can have that, you can have your customer data sitting in your cloud data warehouse, like let's say Snowflake or Databricks. I mean, these are great companies, right?
Yeah.
And then, if you're going to you can activate different places. Do you need a CDP? I'd argue you probably need something that your marketers can go and do those things. But and we're going to talk about AI later. But then you enter AI and maybe even like segmentation, which is one of the core things CDPs I think do pretty well. Like maybe if that's done by using an AI agent, do you even need that anymore? And then if you can activate other places, and it's rare that you're going to use a CDP for your sole BI environment anymore. Probably going to want to pull in. I think as ad tech and martech kind of collapse together, right? You're going to want your, let's say, top of funnel engagement data from advertising and ad tech, and piped into the same BI environment that your CRM and like own media is going to go into. You probably wouldn't want a CDP for that anyway, right? So
yes, it's interesting. I think you're covering the fact of flexibility. People want the flexibility of putting their data where it's needed at that time. And possibly CDPs are a little bit of walls where you can't be as flexible because it's, you're not the owners and you can't meet or collaborate the data where you want it. And I think collaboration of this data is a topic that we definitely want to discuss, and we can, start now. But this data is so valuable to, as you mentioned, with that merger of MarTech and AdTech, to activate all this data on advertising technology would be so much easier if you just own the data yourself, and especially if AI is going to come into play and segmentation, to connect it right there. So what do you think about collaborations in the industry? And I guess if we're looking at a brand who's using a CDP versus if they're doing it kind of in-house or in a different way, how do you think about collaborations and how easy it is?
CDPs, I think by design are not super easy to collaborate, right? You're putting the data in there, you're working out your data model and your segmentation model and all those things. Once they're set, it's probably not super easy to modify that, right? But looking at collaboration, it's interesting too. I know we're going to touch on clean rooms later, right? And that's been a pretty big, I think a big topic the last couple of years, despite not really high adoption, right? I've noticed many brands using their CDP as a way, because first party data is stored there. Okay, if you're then going to use it for activation of paid media, why not just push it right into your DSP? Or if I've seen many people do that over the last few years, which is interesting. And even if you're just doing it for suppression, right? I think that's kind of interesting. Or if you're going to build lookalikes, that's a good source right there. You can pick a particular segment, right? As long as it's big enough, you can usually go to a DSP and do that. So I think we're seeing, as MarTech, AdTech do get closer, I think we're seeing the CDP one way you can do that. But I've been a little surprised too. Like you look at some of even the media clean rooms. They have connectors built to a lot of CDPs, but like there's not a lot of usage of them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that more people are pushing directly to DSP than to clean rooms. And you can ask, why is this? Is it people aren't using the CDPs as much as they should? Is it they don't see the value in a clean room? It's hard to really say. But I've started to see some traction and activation from CDPs to paid media channels, as opposed to the traditional ones, which would have been email and SMS and other places like that. So
yeah, it is very interesting you bring up that like these big clean rooms have invested a lot in these CDP connections. And when I was starting in the clean room space, it's something I'm really focused in. And these connections came out. I was intrigued and I thought, okay, this is where the industry is going. I really need to invest my time to get caught up on how these connectors work and such. But over time, not one company has come to me and say, hey, I want to use this CDP connector to connect to the clean room. The only way we've actually at Gigi, we've built this 1P platform to actually collaborate in clean rooms. They spin up their own clean room that can collaborate with, let's say, the Amazon Marketing Cloud with their own data, and they don't have to go through that CDP layer. So it's interesting that definitely the trend has been, if they have a CDP, to maybe not use it, or people are just trending to not use CDPs in general, right? So
yeah, it's interesting. So we've even saw, I won't name which clean room it is, but we even saw a bunch of connectors. We tried to use them, they didn't even work.
Oh wow!
Which I think goes to show that no one's using them, right?
Yeah.
And it turned out the underlying API layer had been completely, they had shipped a new version of which published an update, which is fine, but I guess no one was told and no one cared, right? So
yeah.
And then I've even done the connector from CDP to clean room and seen that the match rates aren't great.
Mm,
Let's say, for example, it's a B2B customer, right? You know, well, guess what? If you're doing a match from data from say one of the walled gardens, you're probably not getting business emails, right? So that's your
right.
match rate. And normally, if you have the whole data set in front of you, you can manipulate it. You can, what usually happens is people, you're working with a brand, they give you their list of their transactions, right? And then they give you their customer file, and you have to combine that together because you're only doing one. If you're doing, let's say, a one-time upload of 1P data, you're doing that. So you have to actually have someone transform that and merge it into one database where you have like one row for each person, and then they might have all the transactions listed out, right?
Yeah.
And you want lifetime value, you're calculating it then, or if you want different. So merge it into one, but if you have the connector from CDP, can't do that unless it's done in CDP ahead of time, and almost no one's doing that, right? So the CDPs really aren't designed for that manipulation,
Yeah.
right? At a data science level, they're designed for segmentation, right?
Yeah.
So I think the connectors sound great on paper, but they really don't add tons of value. That's why I think that, one-time uploads, or let's say building that pipe and automating it, or even CAPI, conversion API, I think is much more useful, if you ask me.
100%. I do think there's some barriers to setting it up, but then you have full control if you use CAPI of continuously adopting it. And if you set a CDP, CAPI is going to be easy for you anyways. So that's interesting. And I think CAPI, along with CAPI, there's the ad tag, for instance. You can set up an ad tag, and that flows directly into a clean room, for instance, and matches, very seamlessly. So there's a lot of different solutions out there to collaborate and track your data. The segmentation, I think, is something that you'll be missing if you left your CDP. So I'm curious to know, do you know, if I was a company and I said, okay, I want to, I'm not happy. I'm not part of that 95% that's not happy with my CDP. Where would they go to do the segmentation? You mentioned maybe third party, other types of companies. What do you think?
I think some CDPs that are more composable, like High Touch, for example, does segmentation really well, but also has reverse ETL back to your data warehouse. So you can connect it, or we could use like Snowpipe or other tools to get it there. Or and there's a few other ones. I think Fivetran's a good one that we've seen. In order to get the data from, let's say, your segmentation engine, which could be your CDP, could be something else, back into Cloud Data Warehouse. We've done a lot of work at Helium, for example, using their connector that goes right into I think right into Snowpipe, that goes right into Snowflake. So so we've had a lot of clients. Well, we want to push consented data back in there because that's where we want to build our AI models on top of Cloud Data Warehouse. We don't want to build it on top of CDP, right? Because CDP has this extract of data for marketers. It doesn't have the rich data. It's not, like in your Cloud Data Warehouse, you may have ERP data pulled in there. You may have all your transactions. You may have things you wouldn't have in a CDP necessarily. You can also have the consented data put back in there. So I think what we're seeing is segmentation is going to sit somewhere. And maybe that's a good place for a CDP for now. And with AI, maybe that changes, right? Maybe it becomes something that you don't really need a segmentation engine. You have an AI that does it for you. I don't know. I mean, that's, I think, something we're starting to see get experimented with. But I think the Cloud Data Warehouse is that single source of customer truth where you're going to then build out your AI models on top of, and then, and I think as we've seen with recent announcements too, right? There was the DeepSeek one the other day that caused markets crash. I think it was an overreaction, right? And you could even argue that maybe some of the things they announced weren't totally true, right? Like number of processors they use, for example, maybe it was more than 10,000, maybe it was 50. I don't know, but I think end of the day, what this is showing is that like the value is the things you build on top of that. So I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, Snowflake's approach is we're going to give you a place you can create these solutions on top of. That's a smart approach, in my opinion, right? Because let's leave it up to the marketers and innovators and consultancies and startups, right, in order to figure out what these things are and then build them. And I think that's going to be the value.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, there's still CDPs out there. And so my hot take was that they would be cease to exist. But I think through our conversation, I am beginning to think that there are some that have kind of that unique position and a niche maybe position to thrive in the market. So do you think they will continue? There will be a few players that will dominate and continue to survive, or are they going to pivot and not be named a CDP, but do something different, but continue their business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I'm very confident a lot of the small players who are probably struggling today, I mean, they probably mostly disappear. I think most of the bigger successful ones will be acquired.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think a couple independent ones might continue on, but even you look at, okay, mParticle. mParticle has, in my opinion, the best identity resolution. I think I have like 8 or 9 patents on their identity resolution process, which can, if I remember right, it's probabilistic, but you can also have a deterministic. I mean, it's not real time because it's probabilistic. It does take a little time, but it's really good, right? So, and I mean, like Derek Slogger and who's CTO there, amazing person, great technology, great company. And that's the CDP, by the way, I've done like the longest amount of work with. I think we started working with them, my God, must be like 2017 or something like that. This is way before most people even knew what a CDP was, right?
Wow.
So they've got a great tool. In fact, I can never figure out why they didn't get scooped up by like a Salesforce or something like
Right.
that. I mean, Salesforce could have probably scooped them up for a fraction of what they've paid in engineering to build up a data cloud, right? That's another story.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think maybe you have your Imperities and a couple others that continue on.
Mm-hmm.
But even look at them, like they're changing their pricing model, right?
Right.
They're switching from how CDPs traditionally were priced based on number of records, and then that will go up depending on some of the features you could fold in, depending on the CDP, right? And then I think some of them had some bandwidth charges. I think some of the ones that had higher transaction volumes, right? But then generally it was a cost per record. So I think my understanding is even Imperity switching to more the Snowflake model, right? Where it's going to be based on based on processing and storage, right? And actual usage, right? So it's really the Snowflake. So I think they're even acknowledging like the market shifted.
Right.
It's going to be more the cloud data warehouse native composable model, and we have to work with this.
Yeah. So if you were the CEO of a CDP, and let's say this is 5 years back and you knew where the industry was heading, how do you think you would shift your strategy?
It's interesting. I think Imperity is doing something right with the shift to this new model,
Okay.
right? I
Yeah.
think it's going to go that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard shifting models though, but I think that the sooner you start, the better.
Yeah.
I think shifting to that model is good. I mean, and getting close to the cloud data warehouses
Yes.
is the ones that do that successfully. A lot of them are built on them anyway, right? But I think the ones that do that successfully, who can get really close to the Snowflakes and Databricks, for example, will be pretty well positioned. Looking back 5 years, well, I'll start that earlier. Looking at AI as well. I mean, that no one could have predicted, what
Right.
happened with ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
And I guess some people like Palantir, for example, like even before that, like you look at Alex Karp's, he had blog posts where he's talking about large language models before anyone knew what they were outside of small group of specialists. So there were companies, I think, that got it, but very few.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess we can dive in. I know we've been dancing around the AI subject, but we can dive right in. Yeah, I mean, AI is shifting every single industry as we know it. I think advertising is super ripe for a huge shift and tons of, I guess, efficiencies through AI, and CDP industry definitely being one of them. What are very specific? I guess I have two questions. What could AI do that CDPs are doing now? But what can is there anything that they couldn't do and that we still need to do ourselves, if there's anything?
Looking at AI or looking at CDPs or both?
Um, I guess, no, looking at AI and CDPs. So what can AI take away currently and just automate? And then what would CDPs still need to provide that AI could not?
Yeah. I think one thing, like I mentioned segmentation. I mean,
Yeah.
that's something I think we're seeing it can do it really well
Yeah.
and do it really quickly. And, having to worry about figuring out your segments and how, not to say you don't have to do that anymore, but it's something that's difficult for marketers historically to do. And one of I think the valuable things of CDPs, right? I think we're saying that, okay, maybe a lot of this can be, we can just have AI do it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if remember I was at Parady's customer summit. I keep bringing them up, but I do like them. And it's interesting how like they have an AI tool that'll now write your SQL for you, right? I mean, obviously it's going through there's a code base it looks through, and natural language. There's like a chat feature where you can talk to it. It'll interpret that and go find the right code and write it for you. But if you want to create a new segment, it's AI will do it for you, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's something we're seeing AI is very good at.
Yes.
That CDPs that don't have that or will be at risk for sure. And even I think even ones that do. I mean, do you even need that component in a CDP after that's said and done?
True.
I don't know. Analytics. You think about it. I mean, I think I saw it's funny on Twitter X this morning. Eric Tilbury's this guy, he's this ad tech guy I follow a lot. I think he's great. He wrote something about all these measurement companies are cooked. AI can do in 5 minutes what would take a week with one of these, and he's not wrong.
He's not at all. I totally agree.
And so we even built this. I remember we had like one guy in my team. This is about a year ago, right? He built this on top of Amazon Marketing Cloud, right? He built this really simple feature where you would just put in your request, and then it would write the SQL query for you. Which is, I mean, it's not hard to do, but you need to know SQL. And the person that knows SQL has to understand paid media and analytics and all those things, right? So it's kind of a combination of skills that is not too easy to find, right? So it would write this for you, and then it would say, here's your answer. Show me ROAS for the last 3 months, or show me click-through rates on campaign A in EMEA in March, April, June, right?
Yep.
Boom, done. Do you want this visualized? Yes. You got your table. That's incredible, right? I mean,
it's amazing.
Yeah, to do that would have taken, you have to have a data scientist paired with a data visualization person, right? Or a really good dashboard could do this, but most likely you'd have to have people, right?
But you also have to guess what the customer wants. So I think also measurement companies, they have to build a dashboard where, unless it's, a drag and drop and you can really play with it, but you're guessing what the customer wants to see and not having the customer be able to iterate on that and constantly ask for different things. So I think, having that possibility is going to be absolutely amazing. And it's a little scary and sad. I've honestly dedicated 5 years to learning AMC SQL. I've become very good at, and it's a very unique type of thing that you need to understand. And now seeing, actually, Amazon has released I think it was like a week or two ago, I think during CES, they released the natural language to SQL output. It's sad for me because I spend so much time, but very exciting for, I'm more excited for advertisers because they can much more easily get those outputs that they want to see and obviously optimize their campaigns better. But I am, a little worried for, I guess, measurement companies. But I think they pivot now and they, as you mentioned, build on top of these AI companies, they will really succeed, and where we can go is going to be very, very exciting.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you mentioned that. It's sad for some people. I mean, I think there are some people that need to find new things to do, new things to get trained on. That's for sure. And but generally speaking, I think about like, okay, so you happen to be, the technology, you're able to write SQL, paid media well. I mean, there's not many people have your skill sets, right? Yeah. So I think that it's making this more accessible. I agree with you. So I think it's generally a good thing. But that's like the age-old question. The question of the last few years with AI. I mean, are jobs at risk, right? And then or will it create jobs, or will it be both, right?
I mean, personally, I think it's how you look at it and what you do with it. So as you mentioned, I have a unique skill set, but now I can use that skill set to actually probably build something even greater with this new technology. So I think there's just more opportunities that we can scale. And I think scale and efficiency is where we're going. And if you build on top of your knowledge along with AI, you can really create something very unique and help other companies become more efficient and hopefully help them drive revenue, again, efficiently.
Yeah, it's funny. There's some chat about AI. I think it was on LinkedIn the other day, and I responded that, what about all those people who lost their jobs because of the Industrial Revolution? I mean, I'm sure when they were creating these factories, people were, I mean, I know you read the accounts, people were, oh, it's going to be the end of the world. All these workers are going to be tossed out, not thinking that it's going to create more wealth and create, lift productivity and create millions of jobs we couldn't predict in a million years. Like,
Yeah.
either of our jobs existed 30 years ago.
It's
right?
very true.
I guess consulting, there was in its infancy back then, but a lot of it was, it certainly wasn't tech consulting didn't exist, right?
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of jobs will be created. Overall, there will be some people who need to shift. And, I think you're right. Smart people who have unique skill sets, I think they'll have no trouble shifting themselves, right? I mean, I think that's also like, if people are not willing to accept the fact that let's say, in their career,
Mhm.
there's going to be 3 or 4 times they need to pivot. I'm not saying that I'd have a whole new career, but I think 3, 4 times at anyone's career. I'm telling my daughter this, right? She's 11. I said, you're going to have to change several times.
Yeah.
You need to learn how to think, write, read, and you're going to be supported by tools to do a lot of this and do it faster and better. But like, you have to have you need to learn how to think and reason really well, because those are the things that people are always going to be good at, right? And so I think knowing how to focus on the right things and accepting you're gonna have to learn new skills throughout your career, I think, is the norm now.
Yeah.
And like when I start, like, half the stuff we do didn't exist 20 years ago.
It's true. Yeah. When I think about my son's, he's 7 months old, so thinking about his career is a little scary. I have no idea what's gonna be out there, but I do agree that people do have to pivot, and I think the ones who will pivot and succeed are the ones who see this and say, "Oh, great, I can manage more accounts using this new tool. I can become better using this," versus, "Oh, I'm gonna lose my job. I have to do something about that." I think you should be excited that AI can actually help you drive, hopefully your role. So yeah, that's how I kind of think of it.
Yeah, it's an unpopular opinion, but AI will create way more jobs than it destroys.
I agree, and I hope that's correct.
So do I. But I think the one point of risk, though, for the industry, and I think this is interesting. I don't know the answer to this too. Is, I think Martin Sorrell said that, I think it was about a year ago. He said this, that the days of 25-year-olds trafficking media are over. And that's how I started, right? I started like working with a small indie agency, and people were faxing and insertion orders back then,
Mhm.
right? And this is even pre-programmatic, right? So I mean, but that's how I learned how to, placing tags on pages, understanding, getting back to clients and showing them conversions on things and calculating CPMs and backing them into CPAs. I mean, all that stuff. I mean, that was important experience, right? And a lot's changed, but the basics haven't, right?
Mhm.
But I learned that because I was able to get a job, and there's the whole like 22, 22, 22 thing, like, about paid media. It's run by 22-year-olds working 22 hours a day for $22,000 a year, right? I mean, I think I was making 28,000 or something like that when I started, right? So it's some things have changed, but that kind of hasn't, right? Maybe
Yeah.
it's media is trafficked and run by just young people at these agencies, and will AI remove those jobs?
Mhm.
And if it does, you could argue it probably should. Like,
Yeah.
I had a client in pharmaceuticals. This is crazy. Told me that they have about $1 billion in ad spend. 200 people trafficking that.
What?
Run 200, right?
Wow.
And apparently the agency called up and said they wanted to go to 225.
See, that's interesting. Sometimes the agencies see that as success. They say, "Oh, I wanna if I'm getting more people to manage this,
Right.
I'm succeeding."
200, that's an army. Like,
Yeah.
think about it, that's insane, right? I mean, so like, I can't even imagine what they're, I mean, I know what they're doing, but I can't even imagine like that, having that many people like go through like the blocking and tackling of like setting up campaigns and
Yeah.
DSPs and putting tags and, going to spreadsheets and updating things. It's just bonkers to me, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's unsustainable.
Yeah.
Okay, will AI reduce that number from 225 to 50? It should, right?
Mhm.
But then what happens to that 160, 170 other people, right? I mean, if they're not, people, you have to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. I think that those people have and also you had since you were in there doing it day to day, you have so much expertise. And kind of at GG we're dabbling with this as well is oh, we have some, like, together, we're a tiny company, but together we have like 20 years of experience. Um, you actually need that experience to shape the model, I think. And being able to use that experience to, I think, help shape certain models or make companies better, I think that's really, really valuable. So I can use my AMC experience to help, look at certain queries or help, give context to the model to help it be better and be better for clients. So I think there is kind of a need for all of that wisdom that you did garner.
Yeah, no, look, I don't disagree, but
Yeah.
and by the way, I love what Gigi is doing.
Thank
It's
you.
cool. I remember when I saw Adam a couple of years ago. I think he was even like still stealth mode back then.
I'm sure.
I think I ran into him. It might have been Ramp Up a couple of years ago, which is I don't know if he'll be there in a couple of weeks, but he's here again. I think we sat down and somewhere near, I think it was near the Marriott there. We sat down in
Mhm.
the sun and I think we had a coffee or something like that. And he told me about it. It's interesting to like the rise of CTV, right?
Mhm.
It's happening faster than not anyone, faster than many of us predicted, right?
Yeah.
And it's really exciting.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, I have many broadcasters I work with, right? I mean, we're looking at quarterly declines of subscribers of around 6%. It's insane. Like,
Yeah.
so like traditional business is really starting to like, like it's not that bloodletting's not slowing down, right?
Yeah.
Like, the traditional broadcasters and the MVPDs, right? So it's interesting,
Yeah.
but CTV is making up for it. Like, the pie's not shrinking. It's actually kind of growing a little bit. And that's all CTV, which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've totally sidetracked on the CDP side, but another conversation would be, do you think traditional TV will cease to exist and everything will be moved over to, those streaming platforms? That would be an interesting.
Yeah, it has to. I
Yeah.
think eventually, right? I mean, maybe I don't think it'll completely disappear, but it'll be a little curiosity, like a tiny thing, kind of like radio is today, right? There'll
Yeah.
still be a business there. It just
It's
won't
true.
be. I just think it won't be a big, but almost everything, even like live sports, are also
Yeah.
like Netflix and Apple's buying all the
Yeah.
live sports content, which is the only place that in let's say streaming, right? That I'm saying in linear, the only place in linear where like it's still where you can still get a lot of
Yeah.
advertisers, right?
Well, it's just so interesting to me. I asked you this question, I guess, because I'm talking to brands and there's a huge part of their budget that's still going to linear.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering why one, they're dumping that money into linear when you can't measure it well. But you can measure it if you're dumping it to, let's say, Prime Video. This is what we do, so I know it. But if you dump it to Prime Video, you'll get such great analytics and you can see if people are obviously purchasing after. But it's just amazing to me to see this trajectory and people are still banking on linear TV.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I guess counterpoint to that though would be like CTV is 1-to-1 in theory, right? And let's say linear is 1-to-many. But I think there's still value, right? I mean, a lot of people still watch it, right? Maybe you can't tell how many people actually watch your ad, right? They might be
Mhm.
getting a beer at the fridge or playing around their phone, not paying attention, which is what usually I'm tweeting something, right? So, um, but there's still value, and this is like you probably heard of that about that example of it was Nike, right? Where they brought in a new head of digital, a new CMO, a new head of digital, like this brand stuff, forget it. Let's just double down on performance because we can every dollar in, we know we're getting $1.20 back or whatever. So they really went all in performance. First year was great. They set record sales, and then I think over time they noticed that the sales started dropping. Right, the ROAS was getting less and less. The overall return on marketing investment. I realized, wow, like we're not getting new products out there. We're not getting on it. People are forgetting about us, right? That the younger kids, they're not. Our ads aren't resonating with them because we're not putting ads in places they can see, right? So there is a
Yeah.
branding element. So
Yeah.
I hear you. I mean, I've been working in digital marketing pretty much as long as there's digital marketing, and like I believe in it. I wouldn't be doing this otherwise. But
Mhm.
I think there is a brand element that it can't be overlooked. It's really important, and I think there's a place for linear in that, but at the same time, there's a place for digital out of home, right? And out of home, right? I mean, billboards, they still work, right?
You have a very, very good point. I think I'm more passionate about it because I'm like, why would you put, you can't measure it. But I do agree it has a big impact on brand awareness. And if you don't keep, especially Nike, it's as a staple brand that could be forgotten if, Adidas and these other brands are continuing to do those pushes. And even, the Super Bowl it's coming up. I can't stop reading about these ads and, and it creates that brand awareness and that you remember these brands and they're top of mind. So you make a good point.
Yeah, like you think about like the just do it. It doesn't really mean anything, but like we're like, but it does mean something, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then they stopped doing that and they started like just pumping out emails, right?
Right.
And buying display, and 3 years later, sales started going down because Under Armour and OnCloud and all these upstart brands with really cool products and like, a cool brand image, and we're getting out there and just and eating their lunch. I think it's interesting. So I think there's a place for both, and I like to think we're at a point where, say, CMOs and marketers acknowledge, we're going to need both, right? We're going to have, and some of it's maybe not going to be measurable short term at all. I mean, I remember trying to like working for direct response companies, trying to be like create like whether it's for billboards or space ads in magazines, like links where people could go in. And so I think you can take a QR code. You can take steps to make traditional media marketing a little more measurable.
Yeah.
But I think there's still the brand aspect that maybe will be a little less measurable, a little more intangible, but that's not a bad thing.
No, that's like the greatest incrementality test they could have run. So they know linear TV works.
They know it does, yeah. And I think that's a topic, incrementality, for another one, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Good one. There's a lot to unpack there.
Oh, so much, so much. Something I've become more passionate about over the past couple of years, so I'm excited. Well, I guess going back to CDPs, is going back to our AI conversation as well. Yeah, was there something? So I was reading about what could AI take away, but what can it not take away? And I think there's also a conversation of, ethics and privacy and spinning up the core data infrastructure. So I do think there are some aspects that AI cannot replace, and that humans will actually have to be in the loop for. I don't know if you have any other ideas of what you think AI could not take away.
Well, I think looking at CDPs, right, and let's say first party customer data, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to build AI applications, right, which everyone's trying to do now, right? I mean, you have to have the data sitting somewhere. It has to be consented, right? And you have to have it in a place where let's say that it can be accessed. So I think that there's no shortcut there, right? I mean, I had one customer. This is a couple of years ago, right after the ChatGPT thing came up. It's funny. I remember she said to me, she's like, well, now that AI is a thing, does this mean I don't need a damn digital asset management anymore? She's like, I've been looking at them and they're a lot of money, and they're paying to set up. You have to work out the taxonomy. You have to migrate everything. Everything has to be tagged with metadata. She's like, do we even need it anymore?
Right.
Can we just set an agent loose and a rip through? And
Scary.
I thought, it's like, that's interesting. I mean, in theory, maybe in the future, but I mean, for now, I think it's almost more important to have a dam. I told her, she said, why is that? I said, well, you want this thing to be able to point to a place where all the content you want it to review is sitting, right? Not because if you just let it loose, it's going to find everything, right? I said, you want to train it on stuff that's not brand approved? You want to, train it on who knows what, right? So I said, you want to have everything organized in one place, and that's what you're going to use as the material to train it. And then, because it's nothing works out of box, right? So I said, it's almost more important, at least now, the current state of AI. And so no, I told you should continue with the dam, get it set up, and then if you want to, let's say you want a use case for creating, I think one of hers was, we want to be able to create one version locally, let's say globally, and then we want to localize that into 15 languages.
Right.
So could we take that and resize in different things and translate and put the language? So, once we had all of the assets in one place, it wasn't that hard.
Got it.
Then you could kind of train it on brand standards, and then you still had humans in the loop for now.
Right.
And then maybe one day you can have agents reviewing the work of agents. I mean, But as of now, it's okay. There's going to be a human reviewing this, but to your point earlier, instead of translating the document, the human's just proofreading it
Yes.
and maybe making some minor. So instead of it taking a week per document per location, it's taking a couple hours. That's huge savings.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Massive. Okay. So there are still humans, which is great. Looking at, CDPs and what I was trying to break up, what are CDPs really, really good at? And through myself thinking about what could AI replace and not. And it was amazing to me saying, okay, they're good at this. AI can replace that. Like CDP, the managing all the tags and the coding. I was like, oh, no, they can't do that. But of course, AI is great at coding. That's one of the best things it can do. So it can do all these incredible things. So yeah, it's very interesting where the industry will go there.
yeah, and then you probably heard the recent buzz about the advertising, right, with AI, right? Like the complexity. I think the CEO he had
Yes.
that interesting thing. He was like, well, maybe the future of advertising is you're advertising to agents, right? You're not advertising to people anymore, right? Maybe a lot, let's say you want to go to a trip to France, right, this summer. You're like, you know what, I'm going to have an agent, like, hey, listen, agent, travel agent, go make me a trip to France,
Yeah.
including buy the tickets,
Yeah.
reserve the hotel rooms, reserve stuff in restaurants. I mean, those are things that like AI is pretty good at, right? I mean, if you train it in your taste and you kind of give it some guidelines, right? All the information's out there, right?
Yeah.
So in theory, you could do that. I mean, I wouldn't trust it buying tickets for me, but then again, maybe if I had an agent doing that 20 times and I saw it was actually after time number 20, you say, actually, here's my credit card, go ahead, right?
Exactly.
So the argument was like, is there a new advertising world where we're advertising to agents, right? I think it's interesting. But I think if that happens, we have to redefine what we call advertising, right?
Right. Yes.
Because I almost think it's in like, use a big word here. We're anthropomorphizing AI, right? It may do tasks that humans do,
Yeah.
but it's not human, right? It's just a bunch of code running on top of a large language model, right? So it's does it need to see an ad, like a space ad? Or does it need to see a display ad?
Yeah.
Does it need to see a movie? No.
Yeah.
But, does it need access? So is there a world where we can pay to prioritize information that agents are reviewing? Maybe kind of like a sponsored brands, right? On like retail media or or almost like a SEO, right? For AI, where you're paying to have, if you're a brand, let's say you're an airline, you're saying, okay, we have these tickets to Europe.
Yep.
Let's make sure these are reviewed right away by these.
Yeah.
And we have special offers maybe for people who are going to go to Paris, based on certain demographic information or geographic, right? So maybe there's a world where that happens. I can see that happening, but I don't think there'll be ads the way that humans, like that we think of ads, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting, and it actually excites me. I think that's very cool. But it's interesting that you bring that up because I was listening to a podcast, and it was all about, obviously these models are super expensive and these companies are losing money. And so one of the ways was actually to thinking about putting ads in the chats and such to try to cover those costs. And that might be somewhere we need to go. I do think, AI is going to become more commoditized or easier to build on top of and cheaper as we go on. But it's interesting, these new things that pop up. And it was a question of, oh, is that right to put ads, in your own chat? But I guess a question for you is, if you're thinking about that whole flow and a certain airline is paying for that, do you think it has to have that sponsored, little tab?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think it gets to here's where I think it gets really interesting. The definition of an agent, right? If you look up in a dictionary, right? Or you look it up on online dictionary, right? It'll tell you the agent is someone who represents your interests, right? And an agent is compromised if they aren't solely representing your interests.
Interesting.
So I think that's an interesting, like, philosophical debate, right?
Yeah.
If an agent's being unduly influenced by advertising, is it really still an agent, or is it just some kind of a tool that you maybe can't trust, right? Because some airline figures out how to rig the algorithm and and prioritize its expensive tickets instead of cheaper, better ones that you're not able to see, right? So in theory, I think an agent, if you really define what it's representing you and your interests alone, and it's doing things for you on your behalf. is kind of like a slippery slope there. Okay, you can prioritize what it's seeing, but if what it's seeing is not in your best interests,
Is it really?
I don't know the answer, right? But I think it's
Yeah.
really interesting. But I think the
That's very
future
interesting.
is going to be ad-supported AI. There's no way. If you think about it, the internet today, people bitch about advertising all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They complain about advertising all the time. If it weren't for ads, content would all be gated.
Yes.
Like you
That's
would,
true.
most of the stuff. I mean, yeah, there'd be people who do things as hobbies, but everything has a cost, right? There's, there's serving costs.
Big time.
There's nothing. Maybe there would be charitable organizations that do things, but in general, most of the things you do on the internet are supported by some commercial model, right? In a commercial model, either you pay for it, or you could argue the case of social media, you're the product, right? But they're advertising to you. That's why you're the product, right?
Yeah.
Or they're taking your information, they're selling and doing other things. So
Yeah.
there needs to be a commercial model behind that. So I think the future of AI is there's going to be a heavy ad supported component.
For sure. Yeah. I wonder if it's going to be I want to opt out and pay more, like Netflix.
Netflix or Facebook does that in Europe, right?
Right?
And,
Oh,
you
interesting.
can
I didn't
pay,
know
I think
that.
it's $15 a month and not get any ads, right?
Ah.
Which is, I mean, they calculated, okay, what's our revenue for EMEA? Because this was, I think the EU had this mandate, like you have to have a free version, right? Or a non-ad version. For people need to build, okay, the rationale was people need the ability to opt out of advertising.
Got it.
And that's not a very American thing, right? But
No.
this was the EU, right? They love the regulations.
Yes.
So it was people need, so if they can opt out, do you not let them access your platform?
Mm.
So the choice, I think, was a smart one, is let's give them a way for them to pay what our average revenue would be per user per month,
Smart.
which is $15.
That's very smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think more and more, I try to read articles, but I think more and more I'm getting gated by subscribing to the plan or whatever. And I get it. You hire people to write these articles and things. You need to make money, but yeah, sometimes it can be frustrating for the user.
I think that's a discussion for another time as well, like the publishing and monetization. I mean, I think that's a topic I'm being asked about all the time by publisher and broadcaster clients, but more publisher these days, where you look at, I saw this chart the other day, it's wild. You look at publisher revenues, right? And like around 2000, they just start to dip, right?
Interesting.
Just go off a cliff. And then around, not coincidentally, the same time Google's revenues start going up. And then you see Facebook's revenues start going up, and there's another dip. And then it's just like continual decline into almost nothing. And then, there's a transfer of revenue from traditional publishers over to, Google, Meta, and the online world. So I think that's a topic for another time. Maybe we can dive into a lot. But I think that's really interesting how we've seen that. And I think that you're seeing more gated content now, but I'd argue, I mean, is it too late, right? I mean,
I don't know. So for me, I'd rather, so I do pay for a New York Times subscription and all these things because I want to get high quality content.
yep.
And I think that if I know I'm paying or it's being gated, I can trust that source. So maybe I'm more old fashioned. That's where I want to get my content. But yeah.
I subscribe to the New York Times as well.
Yeah.
The Atlantic and a few others I really, really like. And
Yeah.
New Yorker, for example, just incredible. Yeah. So I'm on the same page as you. I think that good news costs money.
Yeah.
And we should be willing to pay for it.
I agree.
But I look at a lot of publishers, and many of them are struggling, right? So I think that
maybe consolidation there too.
I think we're starting to see that, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So
yeah.
And they probably need and they'll need CDPs, right?
There you go.
or something to manage the first party data.
Yeah. I guess before we wrap up our conversation, do you need anything else to cover on CDPs? That we didn't get to?
Yeah, I think the other thing we talked about a little was, I mean, maybe we already exhausted that, was about clean rooms, right? About CDP to clean room. I mean, it's not been as much activity as I thought there would be. But it's interesting too. I mean, I know you've been doing a lot of work with AMC, right? I mean, and which I love, and it's been really cool to watch it develop over time. And in fact, that I think the data manager panel is awesome, right? That they're launching, right?
Oh, yeah, that's very cool.
So I think that they're taking it seriously. In fact, a lot of the work I've been doing the last few years is just, okay, like brand, you have this media clean room, you're using it as an analytics engine. That's great. You're pulling signals from, from Amazon. You're able to do a lot with that, but why aren't you uploading your first party? If you have the first party data, why aren't you uploading it? And it was always surprising to me how few brands are doing that. And then, but it's got to come from somewhere, right? And maybe if you're a CPG, you don't own the transaction that takes place in your channels, retailers. Maybe you don't, but I think for many brands that do sell direct, they should, they have some first party data. Maybe not all. Maybe maybe 15, 20% of their business is, let's say, direct, right? Whether it's digital, their own brick and mortar, et cetera. They have data. They should be using that to.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot you can do. And does it come from CDP? And it needs to come from somewhere. And I think that's what's been interesting. So I think there is a spot for CDP, but it needs to be, I don't know if the out-of-box connectors, I haven't seen them work well because I think the limitations we discussed before. So I think there needs to be, I think CDP may still be the ingress point. But right now it's not being used a lot. Maybe there's a better way to do it. Maybe it's just CAPI. I don't know. But getting the look back from CAPI is challenging. You'll need to store that. Maybe that's a one-time load and you use CAPI moving forward. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think that is something that we chatted about briefly. So I worked with a lot of brands trying so hard to get to collaborate their first party data with AMC because it's so important, especially if you're a big brand. Even 20% of sales coming from online D2C is big, and you want to see if your Amazon advertising, for instance, is helping that and drive that. So I've really been trying to push that, but I think it's still new. It's funny, it's not, but I think it's hard for people to wrap their head around what's happening with their data. Is it being moved? How is it going to be used? And then who is the person that's going to be the champion in-house to say, hey, security, officer or privacy compliance, we need to do this because X, Y, and Z, and that's going to take a couple months for that to flourish and see if we can do that. And then, any kind of movement of data is very scary for brands. So I do think that as we're progressing and AMC and Amazon is learning off of all these things, they launched AMC for clean rooms. So you can spin up an AMC clean room instance so you can not move your data. It's all in one place. You control it and you can just collaborate. So I think there's different ways that are happening now. And maybe it's not the traditional, the CDP connector, but different ways to collaborate with that data.
Yeah, it's interesting. I will go so far as to say this. If a brand is using AMC and they're not uploading first-party data, let's say they have first-party data and they're not uploading it, they're only getting a fraction of the value they could be getting for all the reasons you just mentioned, plus more. And it's interesting too. I almost think that's a cop-out that when brands, because so many times we work with brands, it's so hard to move the data in there. It's like, well, really? You're sending your data out to 3 companies, with secure file transfers,
So
SFT, you're getting it appended by 3 third parties.
Yeah.
You have no problem doing that, but
Yeah.
suddenly, we're going to put an S3. Good Lord. I mean, it's, this, we got to involve InfoSec and got to do this whole review. And then, and then some will even say, we're worried because it's Amazon. Yeah, Amazon's what are they going to do?
Yeah.
And they're, the size of Amazon, they're going to take our data and steal it and market. I don't even know what they think they're going to do with it, but that's just a silly objection, I think, right? I mean, it's a clean room, first of all, right? So I think that's a cop-out. It's similar, I've worked in healthcare a lot in the past. They would always we can't do that because of HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Privacy and Accountability Act. We can't do it. And you look at HIPAA and say, okay, HIPAA restricts your covered entity. There's certain things you can't do, but you can do that. You just don't want to, right? You use that as an excuse, right? So, we can't. So healthcare is famous for that. So I think there's a lot of that going in retail where it's we can't use our first-party data because privacy team will never allow us. Okay.
Exactly.
So, and a lot of times we go through these reviews and it ends up being okay. And but it adds 2 months, right?
Yes.
Or even one telco, it took 2 months to get CAPI set up one time. I mean, it's not hard to do, right? But 2 months of going through these call after call, right? So meanwhile, again, they're uploading data to all these other places. I won't name any names, but they're doing things I don't think are very secure to like get their data appended by
Yeah.
third parties, or for the traditional marketing campaigns, direct mail and stuff. They're like giving it to mail houses, right? I mean, I'm not saying you can't trust those mail houses, but what I'm saying is like you have no problem doing that because you've always done that. But like, good Lord, God forbid you're going to upload one file to an S3 bucket that goes in, that then gets synonymized, right? Completely.
Exactly.
So, and it's your S3 bucket you own. So I don't really understand. Some of these objections I think are just excuses.
I totally agree with that. And I think they don't want to be, oh, I was the person that did that. And then somehow something happens. But it's interesting. The pushback, as you mentioned, is, oh, Amazon has my data. Well, no, Amazon does, it has by S3. Again, you own it. And AWS is a different system than, Amazon advertising. And trying to convince them that it's okay and they're not going to be using your data is very difficult. But I think Amazon is famous for making things a little complicated, and then tool providers can just build on top of that and make it easier. So for instance, Gigi has built this easy connection to Shopify. You don't have to move your data. You can just press a link and then we can collaborate your data. And that's less scary than saying, hey, we're going to extract your data, upload to S3, then we're going to manipulate it, and then we're going to, do all these things. So even AMC in general is complicated, but I think Amazon sometimes does that on purpose so that tool providers can build on top of that and scale for them.
I saw a recent announcement about, I think it was a partnership between GGTV and it was Mitch's company, right?
Stackline.
Stackline. Yeah, that's really, really exciting.
Yes. Yeah. I am thrilled by this partnership. We started talking probably, honestly, it happened very quickly, which is amazing because I think the opportunity was so big. And it's an incredible tool that, Stackline has this panel of millions of shoppers that upload their receipts from retailers online or in store. And as we were talking, that's also a portion that is missing from, if you're a CPG company and you sell a lot in store, they're saying, oh, we can never measure that. But you can. It's amazing. So now we can actually create audiences off of this data and collaborate it very, cleanly within the AMC clean rooms and measure this holistically. Hey, I saw that ad and actually went in store and purchased something. So the opportunities that are coming from this collaboration and what we can build off of is so incredible. And this is just the beginning.
Yeah, for attribution or for, you mentioned incrementality. I mean, there you go. I mean,
Yes.
so I'm excited. I saw that. I was like, that's smart.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm really excited by it. Awesome. I guess you actually, when we were chatting about this session and things, you brought up something that really intrigued me to look into a little bit deeper. The DMP, data management platform. You had some thoughts on it, and I looked into a little more, but I want you to start and kind of mention what is a DMP and are they going to continue to exist as well?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think the lowly DMP is making a comeback, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So, and I guess it's funny, like looking back a few years, I mean, I was of the opinion, I guess I was wrong, right? That, with deprecation of third-party cookies, which, hasn't really happened, but it kind of is anyway. I mean, we're looking at 80% opt-out rate, similar to IDFA. And after Apple published ATT, it proved around 80% people opt out eventually of third-party cookies. So you have that signal loss, right? So I was of the opinion, because third-party cookies going away, do you really need a DMP anymore, right?
Yeah.
And I think there was a joke a couple of years ago that Lotomate was the last DMP standing, right? So, but I think we're seeing them make a comeback, right? We're seeing like Permutive, for example. I see them all over the place, right? I think they have a great company, a great solution. And I mean, many publisher clients are now like, we still had DMPs, or if they didn't, they're looking at them now. I think for sell side, I think they're making a comeback. And I think what's interesting is, not only are third-party cookies not totally going away, but first-party cookies never went away, right? People use them.
Yeah.
And on top of that, what's the difference between a CDP and a DMP? Obviously cookie data, right? But it's like, I mean, CDP is really a place for managing data like a DMP, but a CDP just has like segmentation workflows built for segments for
Exactly.
marketers as opposed to audiences, which you would have for paid media. So it's like, so I think CDPs on buy side, I mean, DMPs on buy side definitely took a hit with signal loss, but sell side, they've never gone away. And I see a lot of interest sell side in having them. Now that, okay, are we going to have seller defined audiences? Are we going to push data we collect in DMP to different places, right? Like maybe we're going to push it into, we're going to eventually go to a DSP, right?
Sure.
Like maybe we need to, especially if we're going to be, I mean, if you're a publisher, why not syndicate your data, right? You can monetize it that way potentially. You can cut deals with different DSPs, right? Or you can go into a clean room, right? And you can create your own data schema, and then you can,
Yeah.
and then there's lots you can do with it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's then, because then you're not giving it away, right? So I think that a DMP has a place in that world on supply side, which is really interesting. And then ultimately, I think what we almost need, right, is like a CDP that works like a DMP, right? That has audiences, because they really don't. So it's like, and I think some people are trying to do that, but it's almost like we need like something that sits in the middle that works for both. Maybe that's happening anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I was researching a little bit on DMPs, and definitely there's a lot of talk about CDPs and DMPs doing pretty much the same thing and what's the biggest difference. But I think, and then I was researching, does, Amazon and Amazon's DSP have DMP connectors and things? And it's still a little bit nascent, I would say, even there. I think there might be a lot of opportunity for these collaborations in the future. So I think you're right. There is an opportunity for DMPs to make a comeback. But yeah, a very interesting topic you brought up.
I think there's a space for a composable DMP. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. That'll be very interesting. Well, I guess that's
That's it.
for that. Thank you so much for, I guess, joining us. I don't know how to end this. Thank you so much, Rio, for taking the time to chat with me today. I think this was a very interesting session and talked a lot about things that I didn't think we would talk about, but so happy that we got to. And I'd like to thank Delve Deeper again for this incredible studio that we get to use, and it was amazing.
Gloria, this is wonderful. Love the conversation. I look forward next month, right? We'll do it again.
Exactly.
I think we have a few topics we can talk about.
Oh, too many.
Yeah. And then, yeah, shout out to Delve Deeper, Greg and Anton, for the great space, and talk to you soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.